Can Pakistan beat its Baloch insurgency?
It was a simple and clear message to China and Pakistan to withdraw immediately from Balochistan. China, you came here without our consent. President Xi Jinping, you still have time to quit Balochistan.
In the past few years, BLA has increased its attacks in the region to challenge the writ of a Pakistani state. So who is behind the BLA?
This is the Balochistan Liberation Army, the group that has been smashing China left and right, but not in China. In just 2024 alone, the BLA carried out more than 150 attacks. Their main target was the $62 billion China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or the CPEC. They've bombed roads and eliminated Chinese engineers and technicians flown in specifically to speed up the work. They've become such a pain in China's that part of the body that China had to bring their own security to protect their workers in Pakistan to safeguard their projects under CPEC. Even Pakistan has deployed around 12,000 military personnel to protect Chinese workers. But despite all the military, intelligence, and security from both China and Pakistan, the BLA single-handedly brought both of them to their knees. To make things worse, the BLA declared Balochistan as an independent nation, a bold move that lit the entire region on fire. But who is the BLA, and why are they so fiercely against China and Pakistan? Well, the BLA in reality has nothing to do with China or Pakistan. The reason they are fighting is for their rights. And according to the BLA, it is China and Pakistan that have been snatching their rights and doing injustice to them. To understand this current conflict, we need to understand the root cause of this conflict, and who exactly are the Balochistan Liberation Army. The BLA is labeled as a militant or terrorist group by the Pakistan Army. But for many Baloch people, they are freedom fighters who are fighting for the independence of Balochistan. This is the largest province in Pakistan, covering a massive 347,190 square kilometers, roughly the size of Germany. This region was annexed by Pakistan in 1948, just 6 months after the partition of India in 1947. But the Baloch people never accepted Pakistan as their country. Why? Because before the partition, the Kalat region of Balochistan wasn't part of British India. It was a princely state with a treaty directly with the British Crown, just like Nepal and Bhutan. That meant legally neither India nor Pakistan had the right to claim it. As British India was being dismantled in 1947, the princely state was given 3 choices: join India, join Pakistan, or remain independent. So the Khan of Kalat, the ruler of the Baloch princely state, chose independence. But Pakistan? Well, they had other plans. Now, before moving on, as you guys know, the YouTube algorithm is not a fan of controversial videos about war. So we just need a quick favor from you. If you can just take a second to hit that like and subscribe button down below, it really helps out the video tremendously. Thank you. Initially, Pakistan recognized Kalat's independence, but that recognition didn't last long. Barely 10 days later, Pakistan's Major General Muhammad Akbar Khan moved into Kalat with troops. Pakistan Navy destroyers were deployed at the ports of Pasni and Jiwani. Kalat was surrounded from all sides. The Khan of Kalat was taken to Karachi and forced to sign an accession document. With that signature under force, the entire region was declared a part of Pakistan, and from then on it was called Balochistan. Soon after this forced merger, a storm started brewing. The Khan's younger brother, Prince Abdul Karim, felt betrayed. In April of 1948, he formed the Baloch National Liberation Committee with just 100 to 150 fighters and launched a guerrilla war against Pakistan's military. They operated from the rugged terrain of the Haran and the Nushki Hills, near the Afghanistan border. Despite their small numbers, they hit back hard. Pakistan was stunned. Its forces were struggling to contain this rebellion. So on the 8th of July, 1948, the army approached Prince Abdul Karim under the pretext of peace. They took an oath on the Quran, promising forgiveness if he surrendered. Moved by the sacredness of the oath, Abdul Karim and his men came down only to be stunned by what was planned for them. Because it was a trap. They were all arrested and thrown into Quetta's prison. By 1958, things had gotten so bad that Pakistan had to impose martial law. And with that, Balochistan lost its remaining rights. Also, the One Unit scheme was introduced by Pakistan in 1955 to merge all provinces into West Pakistan into a single administrative unit to reduce the autonomy of regions like Balochistan. It was seen by many as a move to centralize power and suppress ethnic identities. But an 80-year-old man refused to kneel. His name was Nawab Naroz Khan. He and his followers started launching guerrilla attacks on the Pakistani army. But the pattern repeated, and Pakistan won again. Again, Pakistan sent a message: come down. We'll revoke the one-unit policy. No more fighting. We swear on the Quran. And once again, trusting the Quran, Nawab Naroz Khan surrendered. And once again, they were betrayed. Since then, the region has seen multiple separatist movements because the Baloch people never wanted to be a part of Pakistan. But Pakistan wasn't willing to lose its largest province. The government promised the Baloch people equal rights, political representation, and development, but those promises were never truly fulfilled. According to the 2023 census, Balochistan is home to about 6% of Pakistan's population, and it alone makes up 44% of Pakistan's total land area. Balochistan should have been the richest region in the country, but surprisingly it isn't. Despite all the injustice Pakistan has done to Balochistan, the conflict might not have ever gone this far if Pakistan hadn't done this one thing. Balochistan is insanely rich in natural resources, like coal, gold, copper, and natural gas. But it remains the poorest region in Pakistan. In fact, these resources are estimated to be worth more than $1 trillion. Why? Because most of the wealth from these resources goes straight to the federal government, and this exploitation was a key reason behind the formation of the Balochistan Liberation Army. Around 2000, the BLA was founded by Baloch Mari, son of the famous Baloch nationalist leader, Khair Mari. The group quickly gained support from educated Baloch, university graduates, doctors, engineers, and journalists, all demanding justice. But in 2007, Baloch Mari was killed by Pakistani forces in Afghanistan. After his death, the anger inside the BLA only grew stronger. What began as a fight for rights turned into a full-blown battle for independence. But why does the BLA hate China? If the BLA's fight is against Pakistan's government and military, then where does China come into the picture? Actually, that answer is pretty simple. Exploitation. Huge copper and gold reserves were discovered in the Chagi region of Balochistan. And instead of letting the Baloch people benefit from their own land, Pakistan signed a deal with China to mine these resources. The project officially started in 2001 and was leased to China in 2002 for 10 years. Since then, the lease has been quietly extended, first in 2012, then again in 2017. Most recently, it was extended for another 15 years in hopes of attracting $45 million in Chinese investment. The mine itself is massive. It holds an estimated 412 million tons of copper and gold. And between 2002 and 2017, Pakistan claims it earned around $2 billion from the project. But here's the harsh truth. The Chagi district, where all this wealth is coming from, is still one of the poorest areas in Balochistan. So where's all that money going? China takes home 60% of that revenue. The federal government takes 38%. And the Baloch people, the actual landowners, get just 2%. But this wasn't a one-off case. Around the same time, in the early 2000s, Pakistan signed another major deal with China, this time to develop Gwadar port. Under this agreement, China promised technical and financial help to build a modern port that would create a new trade route that was connecting China to the Middle East and Europe. In 2002, the Gwadar Port Authority was formed. And by December of 2005, Phase 1 of the port was completed at a cost of around $240 million. But here's the catch. Pakistan only contributed $50 million. The rest came from China. But this is where the injustice begins. While the port was being built, local Baloch people were being pushed out. Their land was taken, often without proper compensation, and sometimes without any consent at all. This grabbed land was then handed over to Chinese enterprises with so-called land rights. Government officials and their allies took over most of the land through shady tactics, like transferring ownership to fake or unknown names and faking land records. Port authorities, backed by the federal and provincial governments, along with Pakistan's Navy, Coast Guards, and Rangers, seized massive tracts of coastal land, lagoons, and even foreshore. To make things worse, the entire 700-kilometer or 435-mile Balochistan coastline is now fenced off with military checkpoints, violating the land and sea rights of local fishermen and communities. But this isn't just about land. It's about mass displacement. As thousands of Chinese nationals are incentivized to settle in Gwadar under the promise of tax breaks and special economic zones, local Baloch residents are being pushed out of their hometowns. Many still haven't received compensation for their lost land or their homes damaged by construction. And now there's growing fear among locals that they're going to be turned into minorities in their own province. Meanwhile, protests have erupted over a new issue, the exploitation of fish resources by Chinese trawlers. Many Baloch fishermen have already given up their traditional fishing spots when the port was built, hoping for a better future. But instead, the federal government handed over fishing rights to Chinese vessels, sparking fresh unrest across the region. That's why the Baloch Liberation Army turned its guns towards the Chinese, because they see China not just as an outsider, but as a new age colonizer, even worse than the Pakistani authorities. The anger was so deep that in 2010, Aslam Baloch, one of the top BLA commanders, sent his own son on a suicide mission targeting Chinese engineers in the Balochistan city of Dalbandin. The attack injured 5 people, including 3 Chinese nationals. But there are hundreds of such attacks being carried out by the BLA against the Chinese. But the chances of China leaving this place, because of the gold mine they have struck, and it's not just natural resources, it's the Gwadar port. You might think China loves this port because of trade advantages, but the bigger reason is actually different. So why is China desperate to invest in Gwadar port? You see, China always wanted to develop it into a full-fledged deep-sea port with massive cargo handling capabilities, not because of its love of Pakistan, but because of three reasons. They are location, location, and location. Balochistan shares a vast land border with Iran and Afghanistan, and it sits right on the edge of the Arabian Sea, making it one of the most strategically valuable regions in the world. And just 400 kilometers or 249 miles away is the Strait of Hormuz, which is the lifeline of global oil trade. Every single day, millions of barrels of oil, including 3.6 million barrels of oil heading to China, pass through this narrow choke point. This is where the most critical problems for China arise. To get that oil to its southern provinces, it has to travel a long, expensive, and risky route across the Indian Ocean, pass through multiple choke points, and finally enter the South China Sea. And if just one country along that path turns hostile, China's entire energy lifeline could be cut off. So China came up with a simple solution: connect directly to the Arabian Sea through the Gwadar port. So instead of sending oil all the way around the Indian Ocean through dangerous waters and rival territories, China could simply dock in Gwadar, move the cargo by land, and reach its western provinces in record time. And of course, there was another reason: India. China's interest in Gwadar wasn't just about trade routes or oil pipelines. By developing Gwadar into a deep-sea port, China could quietly position its naval presence in the Arabian Sea right in India's backyard. So to complete this goal, China signed a $62 billion CPEC project under the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, with Pakistan to build everything. A 1,726-kilometer or about 1,000-mile railway line, modern highways, power plants, an 820-kilometer or about 500-mile fiber optic cable, and obviously Gwadar port. Between 2013 and 2017, Pakistan received 71 projects worth $27.3 billion under CPEC, the largest investment under China's entire Belt and Road Initiative. But the point of concern for China and Pakistan is that more than 500 kilometers or about 310 miles of CPEC pass through Balochistan. Which means if CPEC has to succeed, Pakistan must convince the Baloch people to support it. Pakistani officials made big promises, saying CPEC would turn Balochistan into Pakistan's Dubai, create lots of jobs, and uplift the local economy. But Pakistani authorities already knew one thing clearly: the Baloch Liberation Army wasn't gonna trust them. So instead of trust, they brought in guns and soldiers. Pakistan's armed forces, backed by intelligence agencies, were deployed not to protect the people, but to protect China's billion-dollar dream. What followed was brutal. Local militias and army units were accused of harassing, threatening, and even abducting civilians. According to Pakistan's own Commission of Inquiry on Enforced Disappearances, over 5,000 cases have been officially recorded since 2014. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Local and international human rights organizations say the real number is over 20,000. Out of these, more than 2,500 bodies have been found, tortured, mutilated, and dumped. Another tactic reportedly used by the Pakistan Army was burning down homes and abducting local residents. All these incidents fired up BLA's anger, and they started attacking Chinese projects more aggressively than before. In 2018, their suicide squads targeted a vehicle carrying Chinese engineers in the city of Dalbandin. The engineers were working on the Sindak copper gold mine project. In the attack, at least 5 Chinese nationals were injured. Just months later, the BLA took things even further. Militants stormed the Chinese consulate in Karachi, one of the most high-security diplomatic compounds in the country. The attackers were neutralized, and Chinese diplomats remained unharmed, but the incident shook both Islamabad and Beijing. Fast forward to 2022, the world witnessed a turning point. A young Baloch woman, a graduate student, walked up to a van outside of the University of Karachi and detonated a suicide bomb. 3 Chinese professors were killed on the spot. In 2024, a suicide bomber rammed into a convoy carrying Chinese engineers working on a hydropower project, killing 5 Chinese. The BLA fighter later told journalists, China entered Balochistan without the consent of the Baloch people, and these projects will fail miserably. These relentless attacks by Baloch groups, especially the BLA, became part of the bigger reason why almost all major CPEC projects started falling apart. Chinese investments in CPEC and other ventures in Pakistan have either slowed down drastically or, in some cases, completely stopped. And at the center of this fallout was the so-called crown jewel of CPEC, Gwadar port. Despite all the promises, Gwadar never took off. There was virtually no commercial traffic coming in or going out. So Pakistan pulled off a nasty move to fool China. The Pakistani government was forced to issue orders telling all state departures to route at least 50% of their bulk imports through Gwadar, just to create the illusion of activity through the port. For the Chinese, losing money in a failing project was one thing, but losing lives was completely unacceptable. At this time, they made their displeasure known publicly. Chinese officials began openly warning Islamabad. Future investments would only come if two conditions were met: a stable and secure security environment, and political stability, and a media climate that favored Chinese interests. Even at the existing level of Chinese investment, nearly $21 billion, Pakistan was forced to spend over $200 million just on security. However, despite deploying 15,000 troops to protect CPEC routes, violence kept escalating. Between 2018 and 2024, these separatist groups carried out at least 10 major attacks on Chinese interests in Pakistan, resulting in 61 deaths and 35 injuries. However, while Chinese nationals were targeted, most of the victims were actually Pakistani, 52 dead and 31 injured. As the attacks intensified, Chinese patience began to wear thin. Reports suggested that Chinese officials had even opened backdoor communication channels with Baloch separatists, trying to negotiate peace or at least buy a ceasefire with money. And I mean, well, it's China. They'll do anything to secure their interests, even shake hands with armed separatists. But this time it didn't work, because the Baloch Liberation Army had a clear message. They weren't fighting for money, they were fighting for their people, for their land. And in their eyes, China was just another colonizer and abuser. The attacks continued to rise, and China slowly shifted its approach from diplomacy and discreet payments to discreet pressure on Islamabad to do whatever it takes to protect Chinese projects and personnel. By May of 2024, a Pakistani newspaper, Business Recorder, published a bombshell front-page story saying that China had asked Pakistan to launch a full-scale military operation, similar to the infamous Operation Zarb-e-Azab, which caused many civilian casualties during the operation. And this time it was focused on Balochistan. But within hours, the report mysteriously disappeared from the paper's website and e-paper version. Maybe the authorities didn't want the public to know about their plan. But just weeks later, the Pakistani government announced a new military campaign, Operation Azm-e-Istikam, calling it a decisive step to stabilize the country. But the public wasn't convinced. A massive backlash erupted, especially from Baloch civil society and human rights groups. Faced with mounting criticism, the government quickly softened its message, saying Azm-e-Istikam wasn't a full-scale military assault, but rather a targeted intelligence-based operation. Meanwhile, China stepped up its role behind the scenes. They increased intelligence sharing on counterterrorism and expanded exports of surveillance and facial recognition technology to Pakistan. Local experts revealed that Chinese officials even reached out to insurgent leaders in Balochistan again, attempting to pay them off for the safety of Chinese projects. But nothing worked out. On October 26, 2024, Chinese nationals were killed in a devastating explosion near the international airport in Karachi in southern Pakistan. The BLA claimed responsibility. And just 1 month later, in November of 2024, a private security guard opened fire at a garment factory in Karachi, wounding 2 Chinese nationals. These attacks left China frustrated and alarmed. In response, they deployed their own intelligence agents from the Ministry of State Security to Pakistan, aiming to investigate and resolve the case. But despite all their efforts, Chinese intelligence, Pakistani military operations, and even new surveillance tech, they still failed to stop BLA attacks. And this is despite the fact that the BLA has just around 1,000 to 1,500 fighters, as compared to tens and thousands of Pakistani military personnel and security guards from China. China has deployed security personnel from 3 of its own private security companies: Daewoo Security, Frontier Security Group, China Overseas Security Group, and Huaxin Zhongshan Security Services. So how does this tiny force continue to make them bleed? And why is it so difficult for Pakistan's armed forces and even China's powerful intelligence to catch BLA fighters? Well, there are 2 major reasons. You see, Balochistan is one of the most mountainous and rugged regions in Pakistan, covered with ranges like the Sulamai Mountains, Qatar Range, and Zirat Hills. This harsh, rocky terrain is a natural fortress for guerrilla warfare. It gives Baloch fighters excellent cover, secret routes, and strategic high grounds. They use this terrain for classic hit-and-run attacks, ambushing military convoys or installations, and then disappear into the hills, and unlike external forces, Baloch fighters know this terrain inside and out. So geography is the boon for the BLA. And second is the new generation of fighters. Today's BLA ranks are filled with young, educated Baloch students, engineers, and professional people who've traded classrooms and careers for the battlefield. These recruits aren't just holding guns, they're carrying ideological conviction, digital literacy, and tactical training, and that's what makes them so dangerous for the Pakistani state. Even when the army wipes out one group of fighters, another just rises up, more determined, more aware, and more ready. Like Mir Yar Baloch, a Baloch journalist and rising face of the Baloch resistance, who isn't hiding in the shadows. He's trying to take the Baloch voice to global platforms like the United Nations, calling out enforced disappearances, military occupation, and the plundering of Balochistan's natural wealth. He's not just building an army, he's building a global network. And for Pakistan, that might be harder to fight than any bullet. But the question is, who's funding the BLA? In their recent operations, Baloch separatist fighters have reportedly used advanced American-made weapons, the kind left behind after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Well, that changes the game entirely now, doesn't it? While the exact source of the BLA's funding remains a secret, many analysts point to a mix of multiple revenue streams, like extortion, smuggling, and drug trafficking being top of the list. The Pakistani government, on the other hand, has a different story. They claim India is funding the BLA, not because of sympathy for Balochistan, but because, in Islamabad's view, India can't tolerate the success of CPEC. According to this narrative, if the China-Pakistan economic corridor is completed, it could boost Pakistan's economy and make it a strategic threat to India. In fact, after incidents like the Jaffar Express train hijacking, Pakistan was quick to blame both Afghanistan and India. But here's the catch. That claim doesn't hold up to deeper scrutiny. Most independent analysts argue that the BLA's leadership is either operating from within Pakistan or has its roots in Afghanistan. They may have spent time in Afghan territory, but India neither shares a border with Balochistan nor cultural ties, making direct support logistically difficult and strategically unlikely. Iran is geographically closer and shares a long border with Balochistan, but even there, the cultural gap and internal resistance from Iranian Baloch communities makes full support complicated. That leaves Afghanistan's Taliban regime as a potential but unconfirmed player. Tensions between the Taliban and Pakistan have been rising, especially over border issues. Possible, but again, nothing is concrete. Meanwhile, Imtiaz Baloch, a journalist with the Khurasan Diary, offers a more grounded theory. The BLA draws a significant portion of its funds from illegal coal mining operations in Balochistan, an underground economy thriving right under Pakistan's nose. And because of this, over the last few years, the Pakistan army has become practically powerless in stopping BLA activities. Like the most recent and brutal ones, the Zafir train hijack. On March 11, 2025, a regular passenger train, the Jaffar Express, was on its way from Quetta to Peshawar, carrying more than 400 passengers when everything changed. Midway through the journey, in the rugged Bolon region of Balochistan, a section of the railway track was blown up, bringing the train to a halt. Within minutes, heavily armed BLA members, over 70 of them, surrounded the train. The BLA quickly claimed responsibility, releasing a chilling ultimatum. Release our political prisoners within 48 hours, or the passengers will be executed. What followed was a 30-hour-long siege. But not everyone was a target. According to reports, women, children, and the elderly, and even Baloch residents were allowed to leave unharmed. But in the final count, at least 31 people were killed, including 21 security personnel, 4 army men, and 6 civilians. 33 BLA militants were also reported dead. This incident exposed Pakistani security and failed intelligence. But the most serious move of the BLA escalated on the 11th of May, 2025, just days after India's Pakistan ceasefire. The Baloch Liberation Army dropped a political bombshell, claiming responsibility for over 71 coordinated attacks across over 51 locations in Balochistan. These weren't random strikes. They targeted Pakistani military bases, ISI safe houses, police stations, key mineral transport routes, and infrastructure along strategic highways. According to the BLA spokesperson, Jian Baloch, this was a tactical military exercise, not just to destroy enemy positions, but to test their own ground control, coordination, and combat readiness for larger future conflicts. And then came the real message, not to Pakistan, but to India. Jian Baloch declared in a press release on May 11th, stating that every talk of peace and ceasefire from Pakistan is a deception. He said, if India decided to eliminate this terrorist state, the BLA will strike from the western border. We will become the military arm of that mission, ready to crush Pakistan from both east and west. Despite the BLA's bold claims of 71 coordinated attacks, Pakistan's media remained completely silent. No official confirmation and no press coverage. Baloch leaders, including Miryar Baloch, announced a symbolic declaration of independence for Balochistan, challenging Pakistan's authority and drawing sharp global attention. Now, while the announcement doesn't carry legal or territorial weight, its timing couldn't be more deliberate. Pakistan is already under global scrutiny for human rights abuses in Balochistan, including enforced disappearances, military crackdowns, and suppression of free speech. And on top of that, Pakistan's economy is in ruins. It already owes China over $29 billion, and Beijing has made it clear, no more loans, not until the CPEC projects start generating revenue. China never invested in Pakistan out of charity. They saw Pakistan as a strategic corridor, a shortcut to trade with Central Asian countries like Afghanistan and Iran, and a way to cut down oil transport costs. But the BLA has been fighting back against China. However, considering the critical location of Balochistan and the wealth there, China won't give it up easily. It'll look for new ways to control the situation in Pakistan. But now the big question is, will China accept the defeat? Or if it somehow controls the BLA, is something only time will tell. Thanks for watching.